as part of our orbit proposition, many things that we focus on, one being influence and the influence a brand exerts out in the wild. You have introduced a new process and exercise that we run as part of the Orbit framework, which is a suite of many, many processes and analyses. And one in particular is all around this influence thing called influence maps. So as it sort of says there, bit more of an analysis on the influence brand currently exerts and mapping out, I guess, across user behaviours, what influence a brand has, what levers it needs to pull in what areas to improve. Where did this all come from in your sort of mind as part of Orbit? What was missing before you brought it in, which was within the last 12 months?
Well, the birth of Orbit was user-centered search, which we've always tried to consider, but shift into that and like formalising that and creating processes to support that has evolved, and has evolved even more in the last 6 months. Influence mapping is small but important process and section of the whole proposition. The framework itself was developed by Google and Boston Consulting Group, and it was a view of modern user journeys, where people hang out, how many channels are involved. And it basically, I'm going to butcher and summarise it, so it's probably invaluable, but they basically categorised users' journeys into search, stream, scroll, and shop, which is looking at where people are spending the time and bucketing them into those areas.
Yeah.
As a way of giving an analysis that gives you a better view of where to spend your time optimizing, strategizing, and replaces the traditional funnel view of awareness, consideration, loyalty, and retention. And having read that piece of work that was put out, it made a lot of sense to me in the way that we were viewing our strategies and what we were delivering. So we took that framework and that principle and then created a way in which we could apply our own factors, which are levers that we've got at our disposal to directly pull on behalf of clients when it comes to digital strategy. So we layer over the top attention, relevance, trust,
and reach.
So the way that we do it is through multiple data inputs, and then an algorithm basically in the background that spits out the analysis. But we're using Ahrefs data, similar web data, first-party data across Google, GA4 data, social first-party data, both owned and paid. There's a lot that goes into it, and then it computes, and it gives us a very concise visualization and benchmark across the Boston Consulting Group framework, and then our own factors on the back of it. So what that means is we can run that analysis with a proprietary piece of kit that we've developed that then gives us a jumping off point and a benchmark from a strategy standpoint in the areas that we operate in.
Yeah.
In line with user behaviour, which is the key. Being able to produce a benchmark and then measure against it, and also report growth in areas of influence is the whole premise.
Yeah.
And I think it's taken a long time to arrive at the point where we have something capable of actually putting an output that's tangible, that we can use, that stays, that's easier to communicate to clients.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm in the process as part of the agency, so I am familiar with what it spits out, but I know when you first showed me a few iterations of it, and I was genuinely excited to be able to start outreaching that as an output, because I think you've just nailed it there, that it's it might be, there's always this hesitation and sort of maybe skepticism that something new is shoved in front of you and you think, do I understand it? Where's the value? Was this needed? But I think the way that what it spits out, I think for strategic marketing leaders, where it gets real, and we've talked about this week, where it gets really, I think, interesting and insightful is when you start, in the context of market share as the backdrop, you start mapping against your competitors as well. I think that's where it gets powerful. What I find the beauty of it is it's quite a clear so what question to answer, i.e. what it spits out. I feel like in our industry there's a tendency to present data but not either scrutinise the data or answer the okay, so what about that. And I feel like you in particular have done a good job of not only being able to produce this output but then be able to answer the so what, and it actually mattered to then inform strategy and direction. So you were talking about those levers there. Obviously, from the Google and Boston consulting groups sort of base and framework, you have led the charge on building on top of this as a proprietary bit of tech that is fully integrated into what we do. The 4 touch points that you mentioned across reach, attention, relevancy, trust, how do they then map in terms of our thinking? Not each one, I don't mean each one, but do they map directly into then the specialisms that we offer? And what are the sort of considerations that we would then look at, for example, if we produced a map for a brand right now and it was, I don't know, they were looking pretty healthy in terms of trust, but reach was down, for example. Will you give us an example of like walk through the process of what happens on our side, and then obviously to the benefit of the client as well when we produce one of these influence maps?
Yeah, well, on the BCG side of it, the shop search stream scroll bit, it's benchmarking a brand within each one of those. So within each category, there's your obvious platforms that you would think of, like Stream, YouTube, Shop, Google, all that kind of stuff. Where it gets interesting for me is when we apply our factors on top of it. So reach, for example, if we determine there's low reach, and this is all run against a specific set of like a vast amount of keywords, but it will be within a market. So, for example, Kef, within soundbars, we'll be looking at soundbars as an area, and then we will determine those factors, and that's what the analysis shows us, which is why it's tied to strategy. So from a reach perspective, what have we got in our toolkit for that client to improve reach? Do we need to look at paid search? Do we need to look at paid social? Do we need to look at organic social? Do we need to look at discoverability in Gen AI? Like, where is reach falling down, where we could improve, but also then what are competitors potentially doing that we're not doing? So that's one. And then attention. Attention's always been important. It's always been part of the agency ever since we set up. Where is your customer's attention?
Mm-hmm.
That forms part of the opportunity analysis, which is a prerequisite to the influence mapping stuff. And then again, what can we do tied to reach? What can we do to gain attention? How can we improve that attention score? Are we putting the client in the right places?
Yeah.
Trust signals have always been important, but I think it's becoming more and more prevalent. I think the 0-click era is meaning your trust signals are vital.
Yeah.
And building brand in the right areas and making sure that you're looking at community and you're looking at audience and you're creating mental availability so that when people do find a need for something that you deliver for them, you're the one that they recall.
Mm-hmm.
So trust signals, digital PR, brand,
Yep.
that all ties in there. We know what levers we've got to pull in there from a strategy standpoint. What have I been through? Reach, attention,
trust,
relevance is the last one.
Yeah.
So relevance again is the last one that I haven't got into detail on, but that ties into pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And I think we've discussed relevance engineering as a new strand or a new string to SEO's bow, if you like. But relevance across everything. And I think the conversation at the moment is centered around relevance for AI, for generative engines. So we're looking at EAT content, we're looking at how content is positioned, depth of content, where that content sits across the web, how we get brands surfaced in those generative engines consistently, not just once.
Yeah.
So that then comes down to like how we're tracking again in AI, how we're reporting on it. And that tied together, like zooming out on a macro level, those 4 key factors that we pull out of an influence map tie into all the strategy areas, tie into all the levers that we've got to pull, give us a starting point and measurement framework for supporting the message from a strategic level on user-centered search, and it all sort of ties back to that.
Yeah. So just honing in on one of those factors there, relevancy. I had an interesting conversation this week with somebody who has that on their radar for the brand that they're part of, and we ended up actually segueing quite nicely into how, I'm just stepping aside, but it's very much in line with influence mapping and the process that you've just taken us through, because it is one of those key factors that you mentioned. The integration between 2 of our proprietary tools that we've built here, both Bound and Goose, and in particular, Goose is the surfacing of a relevancy score that we have through Goose. So, quick snapshot: Goose is I don't think we've talked about it, have we, on a episode before?
I've got a stat up my sleeve for Goose.
Oh, actually, over to you. Well, it's our content optimization tool. It is a very dumbed down way of describing it, but we've had it for 5 years, something like that.
So
it's become more than that.
V1 was 2021.
Okay, 4 years, yeah.
So we'll be going into 5 years at the start of next year, but that's a content optimization tool which hooks into natural language processing.
Yeah.
But it's advanced a lot, and it's something that we can use at scale, but also now we're developing it so it's got AI models built into it. It's got 3 different models, I think Gemini, ChatGPT and Claude from memory, to help us with the outputs. But aside from that, literally yesterday or the day before, I found out that we've run just under 47,000 optimizations through Goose since we started.
Bloody hell. That's
so
good, that.
In terms of the importance of that tool and quantifying its value, that is a lot of optimizations in 4 and a bit years.
Yeah. and layering AI into that only makes you, your mind imagine. But I guess it'd be good to hear it from you. With relevancy in mind, how do Bound and Goose? So Goose we've explained. Bound is our PR reporting tool, but again, iterated over time, and it's become more than that. I think where they're clever together is the integration between the two.
Totally.
So for someone who is unfamiliar and I guess wants to or needs to hear the importance or the benefit to the client from an integration of those two proprietary tools that we've built, where that sits, how would you think of it? How would you describe it to someone? Because as I said, it was a conversation I've had with someone this week. They were like, they got it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the conception of Goose when we started doing it was to improve relevance of content.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, like I say, advanced loads and got more and more important. And it now has the capability of giving us a relevance score across content in certain areas and stuff like that, which ties into Bound in a way which means that we can measure external content in the same way. So when we're getting coverage, for example, and we're getting citations, not necessarily links, we can then show the relevancy. So when we pull it back and we're looking at strategy and we're trying to push a client into a category, that means that we can optimize and influence on-site, off-site, all the signals that tie into that, in terms of if you think of it like a spider web and you have the client in the middle, all those signals of brand trust, relevancy, depth, usefulness of content in a certain category, in one category, that's the level of analysis that we have the capability of efficiently delivering for them. And then there's other measurements within those tools, like share of search is a prevalent brand metric, which is all tied together. So we can literally document, optimize, and track increases like tangibly across those areas, which is just puts us in a great position. Definitely.
I think as well, we've talked about, it almost feels like the second wave of SEO, another wave of SEO, should I say. And in particular, we've talked about digital PR and the spotlight on digital PR. We've talked about brand signals, etc. In this conversation and many recently as well. Just focusing on Bound because it's come up. It's worth you mentioning about the commercial figure, the commercial number that we can bring into Bound. Just to round that off, because again, speaking to peers, people in our agency and externally over the last couple of weeks, I think there's a real honing in and interest on not only digital PR but what it's delivering. And I think Bound allows us to touch a couple of different areas that, what's say, unique, but I would say are different, because others may not be reporting in the same way. So from a commercial perspective, what have we got in Bound that is to the benefit of a client?
Well, there's a metric in there called currently estimated link value. It should probably be estimated coverage value. Because we're not just tracking links, we're tracking citations, we're tracking mentions, blah, blah, blah. But winding it back to the conception of that metric was essentially designed and evolved over time as a way of putting something against the coverage that portrayed the value internally to stakeholders, because one of the issues and one of the problems that digital PR has faced is, well, it's twofold. It's bucketed into link building, which means that it's got a dirty association for some, but also then those that don't understand where digital PR fits in the bigger mechanic sometimes miss the value. So being able to develop a metric that puts a commercial figure against it, makes it easier to interpret the value. Now, that metric has been developed over 4 years, and it's been refined, and it has its own algorithm, and it has quite a lot of data that pulls in to get to that point, and it is a estimation.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I would say is absolutely 100% gospel, but the logic that's gone into getting it to the position that it's in as a metric certainly has a solid foundation for trusting that value is an equivalent value that a conversation can be had around. So in terms of stakeholder buy-in and stakeholder engagement, when you're talking about the investment that digital PR or good, consistent digital PR requires, it's there to support that conversation.
Yeah. I think it's quite powerful, with the caveat that you've just rightly caveated there, that it is an estimate, but it's a well thought through estimate. I think the power of being able to, I'm going to use a word, commercialize it, is undoubtedly more significant now as well, because we're having more conversations anyway about brand, digital PR's place in delivering brand growth, as well as obviously everything else that supports that. So I think being able to hang your hat with that caveat on a figure just brings other stakeholders, the right stakeholders, into the conversation from a brand side that inherently that marketer might have internal struggles with. Finance, CEO, for example.
CFO.
There you go. Like, the fact that some of these we've had in play before this boom of everyone talking right now about AI, etc., I think is testament, obviously, to we're not the only ones, but being ahead and then bringing our clients ahead of the curve. And I think I've, cheesy, but
I think we are ahead.
I
think there are probably a small cohort of agencies at this moment in time that has the same capability to accurately thread together everything that we can.
With that.
And that's bold, but if I didn't believe that, that'd be sad. But also, it's not something that we've developed in the last 6 months. I'm talking about a body of work that spans a decade. It's a lot of, I feel like it's taken us the best part of 10 years to arrive at this point and to mature into the position that we're in with the capability, the tech, the IP to deliver that value and it be trusted.
On that, first mover advantage type nuance thinking there, is there not the possibility that there's skepticism?
But we're not a first mover because we've done it properly.
10 years.
We've done it properly. It's like, this is going off piste here, but like if I look back to setting the agency up, what we could have done is we could have set the agency up with the creds that we had and the foundations that we had at the point, and we could have gone and got loads of funding, and we could have probably accelerated things within 12, 18 months at a pace in which would have meant that we would have doubled, tripled, quadrupled in size. But we didn't. We built and we grafted and self-funded. And I think that mindset has led us to the point that we're at now. Which is why I think we're in a small number of agencies that are in our position. I'm not saying we're the only agency. We're certainly not the only agency, but I think the way in which we're doing it is very strong.
On that, what apart from what you've just said there, do you believe that some skepticism would exist if you say, you know, we're in a strong position, that it's been very well thought through, it's been considered and steady enough, but always considered, to arrive at a point where you've just said what you've said about us, small number of agencies, but we're one of them, we're in a strong position. Are we, and you said that we're ahead. Are we ahead of other, in how you meant it, are we ahead of other agencies, but clients are ready?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to 100% know what other agencies are doing or what they've got, but I don't really care about that either. No. The position that we've found ourselves in is, I'm going to wind it back a bit. Danny Sullivan went out on stage 2 weeks ago and said, GEO's just good SEO.
Yeah.
We've been doing good SEO for a long, long time, but SEO's reputation has always been met with skepticism. I think SEO, and when I say SEO, I'm talking about tech, content, digital PR specifically, has been not only undervalued, but has had shade thrown at it for quite some time.
Yeah.
Whereas now, the people that have always championed it have moved things forward and taken the conversation forward, and we're now at a point where there's a shift within SEO that we've never seen before. It hasn't gone through this, and I think a lot of what I'm seeing at the moment is reactive, bit of knee jerking, which is completely understandable. Look, I get it. People are a little bit panicked.
Yeah.
However, I am so confident in how we're positioned, not only to deliver for clients, but also in what we're delivering. It feels like, this is going to sound fucking evangelist, but it feels like we've been waiting for this moment for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And call it serendipity, call it what you want. Like, no one, I'm not Nostradamus, no one can see what's coming to the level where you absolutely hit the nail on the head. But it just does feel like we're just perfectly positioned right now. Call that what you want, call that bold, call that deluded. But that's where I'm at right now.
Flipping that and thinking, okay, I'm a client, I work brand side, and listening to what you've just said there, what do you want them to be thinking about or on their agenda, on their list, that maps to our response as being in a great position to be able to help with that? What are the things that they're looking to do? And let's map it the other way. So objectives or issues that they're struggling with, all those sorts of things that a brand marketer listening to this is like, fucking hell, yeah, that's I need help with that, or that's on my list and I didn't really know what the solution was. Thinking that we're the solution, what's on their list that you think makes us perfectly positioned to help them with and for?
I mean, there's a lot. Like I say, I think SEO and SEOs are perfectly positioned to push brands into the right places. I would watch out for agencies that are behaving erratically with what they're communicating, and I would question what's being put in front of brands. Recognising what's the right move could probably be quite tricky, because I imagine that the noise from outbound is increasing.
Yeah.
But the proof is in the pudding, isn't it, I suppose?
True.
If the results aren't there, then that speaks volumes. But I think the other thing that is becoming more apparent, and a conversation that's happening a lot, is the length of time to see exponential gains. Like there are quick wins, there are always quick wins, there are things that can be done. However, growing a brand and becoming a category leader takes time. And there are signals that I would watch out for when you're consuming information that go against the grain of what is, in my opinion, which could be right or wrong, effective marketing, search marketing, digital marketing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Do you think, based on that, do you think an individual thinking of starting a business right now that will have a big online play, do you think they have to think differently to, say, 10 years ago, you being a founder of a business? So in other words, where you need to be present. We've talked through influence maps, for example. You know, was that even a thing 10 years ago? Probably, in terms of a thought and a process and then an output, probably not. So how does a founder right now, considering starting up a business, what do they have to? How do they have to think, and what does that look like? That's different.
You're just talking like a single person founder.
Yeah.
I think single person founder today is perfectly positioned to win because it's authentic.
But do you think they must be going into it with that long term?
I think you've got to try to think long term, but you can't think long term really in today's climate. Like the speed in which things are moving is crazy, but also with that comes the cost of entry being lower.
Yeah.
I think authenticity is something that's becoming noticeably scarce. Yeah. So as a single person founder, if you've got an idea and you develop your business, whatever that business might look like, telling that story in the right places is probably going to get more cut through than it would have 10 years ago.
Yeah. There's more places now as well.
There are more places. It's just choosing the right ones.
We've got a way to do that. Influence map, just circling back to that. I hate that I've just used that phrase. Circling back. That as a label, we've talked about like SEO as a label, as having a dirty word and things previously, dirty phrase and stuff. Influence map. How does a brand, going back to hoping that some potential clients may listen to this, how do they listen to this, listen to what we walked through from this is what influence mapping is as a process and what the output is? How do they recognise that they might have interest in us running one of those exercises for them? Because I don't know whether internally they're talking about the word influence. That's fair to say, because I think in our industry, I think we're very like metrics and acronyms, and influence isn't one of those, is it? It's not a KPI, for example. It's not a metric. It's not a acronym. It's not. So underneath that, what is it that they need to be thinking about that they would step forward to us and go, this influence map, will you run it for us? Is it things like reach, attention, trust, relevancy that are on their agenda to either improve or analyse? Because I have a question over influence as the label of what this process is. So what is it, in your opinion, that they need to be either thinking about or whatever, that where influence map is like, yeah, I want Flaunt to run me one?
Well, influence map and influence mapping is the umbrella that the output sits underneath. So the factors, relevance, attention, reach, trust, search, stream, scroll, shop, all those sit under influence, because ultimately what you're trying to do is A, see where you have influence, and B, see where you need to develop it through those factors and through those user behaviours. I think any brand CMO marketing director that's thinking in terms of relevance, attention, reach, trust, is thinking about brand in the right way. So those are the people that would probably find the value fairly quickly as a jumping off point for a strategy. And if on the other end of the spectrum, if you're not thinking like that, it's still going to be insightful.
Yeah, I think it would be more
direct.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be more guiding. Whereas the other way around, it supports what's already in your mind, or you're on the journey to trying to figure out or improve, or as you're saying, ultimately map the gaps, spot the levers.
Map the gap.
Should work in NAF marketing. That's all I wanted to talk to you about. Influence maps.
Okay.
I think if anyone is listening, get in touch. Find us on LinkedIn, wherever you find us, because there's a couple of different versions of a influence mapping process that we are going through with our prospects and clients. So it'd be interesting to have a conversation about it, run it for some brands. I think we're probably going to move to maybe shouting about it a little bit more as well. As I said, depends on your role, depends on your remit, what's on your desk at the moment, but there's a couple of different versions and approaches that we can take. But we want to shout about it because there's a lot of value in the output. Get in touch.
Agreed.
I haven't got any this or that.
None.
This or that. Which one?
This. Yeah, strong.
Thanks.